So that day we gathered like usual. In the late afternoon, it wasn't too late. The sky was still tinged with orange from the sun, but it was starting to get cold. The wind from the top of the hill was really strong, especially when you just sit there quietly. We hung out near the church, which had long been our usual spot, since my friend's house was just a few minutes' walk from there. And the place was pretty nice too. There was an old wooden bench, kind of rotting, but still good enough to sit on. And from there you could see the city in the distance. Behind the church, there were some old trees with sparse leaves. The trunks were tall, and when the wind blew, they sounded like metal poles softly clanging. Sometimes you'd hear a twig snap, like something stepped on it. But when you looked, there was nothing. I used to love the vibe of that place, especially in the late afternoons like this, because it was so quiet, and not many people ever came around, usually around that hour. The road down there starts getting quiet. You barely hear any cars passing, so the whole vibe gets really calm. You can hear birds heading back to their nests, the sound of branches brushing against the wind, sometimes even the bell of a kid's bicycle from far away. But that day felt quieter than usual. It wasn't just the lack of sound, but the air felt different too, like heavier, and every time you took a deep breath, your chest felt lightly pressed, like you were sitting in an empty room. That's too quiet. At first we were just chilling, sitting around playing on our phones, talking about random stuff, laughing. Nothing felt weird, but I did feel my hair stand on end when I glanced at the church and saw the door slightly open, even though I was sure it had been shut tight before. And that door is usually super heavy, so if it opened by itself, that was weird. And when the wind passed slowly, I saw the door move a little, back and forth really gently, like someone had bumped it from the inside. I didn't say anything to the others, because I didn't want to sound paranoid. But I really had a bad feeling after that, and when I looked over at one of my friends, he was staring at that same door too, but he quickly looked back at his phone, pretending like nothing happened. I knew he felt it too. My town's always had kind of a weird reputation. I mean, it's not like a scary town or anything, but you can find people here who you'd immediately think, yeah, this person's got something going on. Like they'll be sitting at the bus stop, singing to themselves, or walking down the street, shouting at the air, like they're mad at something invisible. And because of that, we're used to seeing stuff that maybe outsiders would think is creepy. But to us, it's just everyday life. But that night felt completely different. And I know it wasn't just in my head, because sometimes you just get a bad feeling. But this was more than that. Like something was watching us, from inside the church. But there's no way to prove it, and that's exactly what makes it worse. We were sitting not far from the church, maybe about 10 or 15 meters away. And from there, we could clearly see the stone steps leading right up to its entrance. The building was really old. Its paint was faded. A lot of the walls were cracked. Some parts looked like they were about to collapse, but somehow it was still standing strong. The front light was out. There was no lighting at all, so the whole front area was completely dark, only barely lit by the fading light from the sky. Just enough so we could kind of make out the shape of the church. Then suddenly we heard something weird. All of us heard it. At first it was super faint, like the sound of some animal in the distance. But it kept getting clearer and closer. It sounded like a goat bleating softly, but it wasn't coming from the woods or from any nearby houses. It was coming from the church steps. I immediately turned to look that way, and I saw a guy slowly walking up the stairs. His steps were really slow, like someone who had no purpose. He was wearing a dark hoodie. His head was down, and from that distance, I couldn't see his face at all. But that bleating sound kept getting louder, clearer, and that's when I realized it wasn't an actual goat. It was him. He was making that sound with his own mouth, but it wasn't like a joke or someone messing around. The sound was strange, like he was chanting something, but it came out as these soft bleating noises, repeating over and over, sometimes long, sometimes short, sometimes it stopped, then started again. And the tone wasn't random. He was following some kind of pattern, something we didn't understand. He kept walking slowly into the church. The door was slightly open, and he just went right in. But the sound didn't stop. It actually got softer, but it was still there, like an echo from inside. A few seconds later, he came back out, carrying something in his hands. It looked like a big book, dark colored, and I was sure it was a Bible. He stood there, at the doorway for a moment, still making that sound, but now the tone had changed. It wasn't just soft bleeding anymore. There was a rhythm to it, sometimes really fast, like it was being pressed. Sometimes it just stopped, then suddenly started again, like some kind of code, or a specific pattern. And when he walked back down the stairs, the sound really made my skin crawl, because the tone of it felt like it got into the cold night air and crept into your ears, made your head feel heavy and nauseous. We were all still sitting there, completely silent. None of us said a single word. We just glanced at each other, then looked back at him again. Unable to move, my mouth suddenly felt dry. My heartbeat got faster, and something deep inside me was telling me one thing. Clearly, don't go near him. No matter what, don't go near him. We immediately stood up and changed positions, without saying much, moving slowly behind the pews, looking for a spot that was still close, but not directly in front of the church. From this new position, we could see more clearly. To the side of the church, there was a small graveyard, old headstones lined up tightly, some already tilted, and many were covered in bushes. At the end of that area, there was a memorial for a firefighter. It looked like a tall stone pillar with a metal plaque in the center. The figure was now walking slowly toward the graves, his sound still coming from his mouth. But this time it got weirder. Not just regular bleeding anymore. There was a faint echo, like the sound was bouncing from somewhere invisible. Sometimes he would suddenly stop, stand completely still for a few seconds, then continue walking, still making that sound. And the pattern was always the same. Stop. Stand still, then walk again. The nearest street lamp was just one, and its light was dim. Its shadow stretched long toward the graves and the tall grass around. He walked slowly but steadily, never wavered at all, like he knew the path by heart and exactly where he was going. He never looked left or right, and what made my chest feel even tighter was that he never stopped making that sound. From the very beginning until now, I felt my chest getting heavier, like pressure from inside my body. It felt so strange, somewhere between fear and curiosity, but not the good kind of curiosity. It felt like my body itself was telling me to leave, before my brain could even think any further. And from the corner of my eye, I saw one of my friends slowly shifting toward the footpath. The others immediately followed, quietly. We all ended up deciding to get off that hill. No one said anything, but our steps were super fast, like it was pure reflex. And every few meters, someone would always look back, with the same thought, don't let him follow. Don't let him notice we were watching him. Our footsteps on the gravel sounded like they were amplified, like 10 times louder. And that just made me more restless. Since that night, my head hasn't been at peace. It feels like something stayed with me. Not just because we saw some weirdo, but more because it feels like a part of that night isn't over, like something hasn't fully revealed itself. And I don't know whether it's better to just leave it alone or to dig into it until I find the whole truth.